acting teacher named Jeff Corey, one of the premier acting coaches in the country. And slowly but surely, I got some work. In fact, on another interview, they asked what was my first show, and it was called Hey Landlord, which was a 3-camera comedy show, and had my first line on that show. And slowly but surely, you work and you work and you struggle and you work. And then I was very lucky to meet up with somebody at Variety, which is our in-house theatrical magazine. The Hollywood Reporter and Variety has everything that's going on in the industry. And every 10% of everything I earned as I struggled along, I put back in publicity. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I'm talking today, is because I had 25 years of solid work, and then I was out of the industry for 25 years, and that's too many stories for you to cover today. But I'm back trying to resuscitate my career and show the public and the hiring people out there that I'm alive, I can talk, I can hit my mark, and give a performance. And so that publicity was a big reason I was able to move forward. And it took me 25 years to go from a walk-on, so to speak, to what we call single card, first position, lead Paul as in television. That's the best billing you can get. And the things about, I told you about the hierarchy in the industry. It took me 30 years to get to top billing and money, and it takes 30 seconds to go back to zero. Because in the American scheme of things, an actor is only as good as his last part. And if you step back, either in billing or money or size of the roles, you stop slipping all the way back. Now, in England, we have Academy, Lords, Sir Richard Burton, Sir this, doing walk-ons. And it's perfectly acceptable. So we have this richness of the great stars in England doing supporting roles and giving a richness and a texture to the character side of the roles of the stories. But in America, if you were Paul Newman, and he's still alive, unfortunately he's gone, and he took a role as a walk-on just for fun, unless he took no billing and was so heavily made up they didn't recognize who he is, he would have ruined the momentum of his career. And that's one of the failings of the way the system works in Hollywood, if you're interested. But the reason I brought all this up is, talking about this, I realized I was lucky enough to do a lot of work, a lot of varied roles for a big guy, which, can I get the box boss, that kind of a character. I was able to branch out into all kinds of different roles. But the point is that I don't want people to realize, or I want people to realize, that it's not easy. Anybody that's out there that has the dream of being a performer should go to night school, get that degree in plumbing, because you can't beat the overtime on Sundays and holidays. You need a backup.
Yeah, that's pretty much true too. And of course, you also started. I noticed here that you started with Hey Landlord, and you appeared in Hawaii 5-0 for about a few years as well too. And you can tell us about that great start. And I'm sure you heard "Book 'em, Dano" so many times. So,
well, here's the story about the Hawaii 5-0. I did a couple of them, but the main one that I did was called Skinhead. Mm-hmm. And this is a very interesting story because it was the first major network television show to talk about male impotency. I had been in an accident and couldn't do it, but I wanted to prove to the guys in the barracks that I was still a man, so I wanted to be convicted of rape to prove that I was a man. Now, that's pretty twisted. And in fact, it was so controversial that after the first airing, it didn't air for 6 or 7 years. It got so much flack from the public. How dare you talk about erections? Today, erectile dysfunction is on every ad in the afternoon, every day of the week. But in those days, it was a big no-no. So what happened was it didn't play for a long time. But it was a wonderful role, and it was one of the few Hawaii Five-O's in all the 6 seasons that he did that the camera ended on my face and not on Jack Lord's.
That is amazing. What's it like working with Jack Lord?
Well, that's another story. And I don't like to talk about the people that have passed, but Jack Lord named himself Lord. That's the first clue.
Uh-huh.
When I did my first Hawaii 5-0, I'm being driven to the set by a Hawaiian driver, and I said, "Tell me about Jack Lord, just like you want to know, I wanted to know, right?" And the driver said, "Mr. Lord has no friend because he need no friend." Now, he was a tough guy. Jack Lord really believed in his heart that he was the reason the Hawaiian Islands were popular. He didn't realize that the islands were there from time immemorial and discovered in the 16 or 1700s. But he thought Hawaii 5-0 put Hawaii on the map. And that was his ego. And the truth of the matter is that he did not volunteer anything. He was the star, he was the producer of the show, and he rented all the equipment to CBS. So what happened was he made a lot of money. And when the Hawaiian Islands wanted to give a parade or anything like that, and they asked Mr. Lord to attend, he said, "No problem. The fee's $50,000 or whatever." He never gave much back. Now here's the tragedy. I like to bring in acting skills along with my little stories.
Mm-hmm.
Actors live by looking at each other. The empathy, the connection from eyeball to eyeball. By the time I did a Y50 with Jack Lord, he was dead behind the eyes. Either he didn't care or it wasn't there anymore. Now, early on, I think he did Stony Brook or one of the early shows, he did a movie called Caldwell's God's Little Acre. He was a marvelous actor, expressive, communicative, wonderful, and you could see in his performance he was alive as an actor. But by the time he became a quote-unquote television star, in my opinion, and people who have worked with him, who hear your show, may want to argue with this, but I felt he was dead behind the eyeballs. And so he was not an easy man to work to.
Mm-hmm. That sounds interesting as well, too. It almost sounds like he's become more like the prima donna or just content, and that's what it sounded like as well, too. So that's just an interesting story, too. You also appeared in Ben as well, too, Mission Impossible, McMillan and the Wife, and Kung Fu, The Rookies, and a lot of these are very familiar with as well, too, and that's before The Sting. And just tell us a little about some of the series you've been in, especially with Mission Impossible.
Well, Mission Impossible has an interesting story. I did get 3 or 4 of them through its run. The Mission Impossible series was, tell me who the main actor was? My mind just went blank.
Oh,
Peter Graves.
Peter Graves, that's it. Because
Peter Graves.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And I did remember the theme as well, too. So
right. So it was a great show, and Peter Graves had the run. Now, I played different heavies. Bad guys are, big guys are bad guys, and I got beat up everywhere. In fact, my career is really a career in dying. I've died in the first 5 seconds of the show, and all the way at the end in the last 5 seconds of the show. In fact, I did a movie of the week, a 4-hour movie of the week with a lot of big stars called Condominium. And I was interviewed in Panama City Beach, Florida, and they asked me, "What did you like to see for Lee Paul?" I said, "To live to the next show," because I was always dying. But where do we start this? Tell me again.
I think it was where we had Mission Impossible. We talked about that.
Okay, that's right. So what happened was, I did Mission Impossible, and then 10 years later, I'm in a wonderful, wonderful show called Underground Man. Now, Underground Man was written by Ross McDonald, And Ross McDonald was our contemporary Dashiell Hammett, who did The Thin Man and a lot of those other great stories. He was a terrific mystery writer, and he developed the Lou Harper series, as Lou Harper was a detective. Paul Newman did a couple movies based on his books. The Drowning Pool and some things like that. Anyway, I'm playing this is another sad story, but it's very important. My real brother had brain damage. How he got it is another story, but I won't go into it. But he was an idiot savant. You know, he had no social skills. He couldn't talk very well. But you put a 50,000-piece puzzle in front of him, he could do it in an hour. It was, you know, he had that kind of focus. Anyway, I'm playing a big oaf retarded guy that I base most of those characters on my real brother, and my mother was played by Dame Judith Anderson, one of the great actresses of the world. It was filled with Jack Klugman and a lot of wonderful people, including Peter Graves. So I kind of re-met Peter Graves years later doing The Underground Man, which was a really, really important part in my career. Now, you talk about the ups and downs. The show was absolutely wonderful with a terrific cast, and if anybody can ever see it and find it on YouTube or whatever, it's called Underground Man, Mission Impossible. No, I'm sorry, Ross McDonald. But the truth of the matter is that you get these opportunities, and then because you're trying to expand your range, I wound up paying a lot of mentally retarded guys, one after another. And I did an Ironside with Jodie Foster when she was only 12 years old.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, well, if people want to take the time, and it's up to them, of course, if they want to take the time and go to IMDb, InternetMovieDatabase.com, or Google my name, you'll see tons and tons of shows. I was very lucky that way. But the truth is that I only went up to one of the producers who kept hiring me time and time again for these big kind of, quote, I hate to demean this, but kind of stupid guys, okay? And I went up to him and I said, listen, you know, you've had me play the same character in 5 or 6 or 7 different shows. I'm an actor. I'd love to expand, do something different. Why do you keep hiring me for the same part over and over again? And he said, it's simple. You do it, it's done. It's over. I don't have to think about it. And I said, okay, all right, and I've done some credible work for you. Will you please consider me for something else? And he said, absolutely. Never heard from him again.
Ouch.
Never heard from him again. And that's what happens to stars and performers in the American scheme. They get to be who they are, and people are hiring them for them. You know, one of the only movies that Paul Newman ever did that didn't make money was a movie called Slapshot about hockey.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, I remember. I loved it.
He was a gay coach, as I remember. And the public just would not buy, even though the performance might have been great, would not buy him in that role. And nobody went to see it. Now, that ties me into, before you have to take another break, I guess, that ties me into the story of The Sting and why that's probably the highlight of my career, only because it's an Academy Award film that won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture in 1973. And again, I'm talking about Paul Newman and Robert Redford and Robert Shaw. Now, Charlie Dierkopf is a little short guy with a bad nose who went on to do Policewoman with Angie Dickinson for 5 or 6 years.
I remember that
as
show,
a regular.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And him and I were Robert Shaw's bad guys, the bodyguards, the garbage men. Now, the true story about The Sting is it was a sleeper. Nobody expected it to do what it did. In fact, in today's money, adjusted for today's money and inflation and all that, it's one of the 10 top grossing films of all time. And what happened was Robert Shaw was not the first choice for the movie. They were going to try to get